And first of all, let's look at data processing. We've seen in previous classes that we have data, information, and knowledge. Data is raw and unprocessed facts like text, images, numbers, and so on. From this data, we can generate information by processing the data, and if we have the information, we can draw in conclusions from that, and then we have knowledge. So let's look at different forms of processing data. So we will distinguish three types of processing: batch processing, real-time processing, and transaction processing. Let's look at each one of those a little bit more in detail. If we do batch processing, what we do is define jobs. And each job indicates data that is needed to do the job, the time period in which it should be executed, and how the data should be processed. What is the goal of processing this data? What do we need to find out? Which information do we need to generate? So here on this slide you can see that there's like, say, 3 jobs that have been defined, and then the operation system schedules from these job batches, and these batches will be scheduled in a time frame that is indicated in the job. And then when these batches should be executed according to the time period which is being specified in the job, it's being done and the CPU actually processes the data. Let's look at a small example of this. Imagine that we have an employee that registers the hours he works every week, and he receives a weekly paycheck. So this means that once a week, that's the time period, we want to process the data of the hours registered, and what we want to do with this data is count the total amount of hours that this person has worked in this week. So we have defined this job with data, time, and how we want to process, and then a batch is being scheduled by the operating system every week to do this requested processing. So this is batch processing. The other type of processing was real-time processing. Real-time processing is not being scheduled like batch processing. Real-time processing is being done immediately when the data comes available, because it's being used in systems that need this data immediately to take decisions. Think, for example, of systems like a control unit of a heart rate monitor. It monitors the heart rate and it needs to use this information immediately to see if action needs to be undertaken or not. The same in an aircraft control. The aircraft is being controlled, and it's being controlled. We get data from all kinds of sensors, and we need to process this data immediately to get information and use this information to know whether action or no should be undertaken. With computer games, it's the same. We need to process the information in real time to make immediate decisions on how a game is going to progress. And also with robots. If we want to make robots move, for example, around in a room, its processors and sensors need to detect if there's any obstacle, and decisions need to be made immediately about which direction a robot should go. So this is real-time processing. The last type of processing that we distinguish is transaction processing. Transaction processing is what it does is defining multiple individual operations in an individual transaction. This is, for example, being done if you want to buy an online plane ticket and want to pay with a credit card. The credit card payment has to be done in an individual transaction, because if it is divisible, then there might be a security risk. So the whole credit card payment, which consists of a couple of individual operations like put your credit card number, put your name, click on a button, wait until the processing has been transferred to your bank, wait for the confirmation to come back, and finish the payment. These are all multiple individual operations that have to be put in one indivisible transaction. Another example is, for example, transferring money from a bank account to a customer savings account. Evidently, this is also some steps of operations that need to be taken, and these operations need to be taken in an indivisible transaction. So if we do these transaction processing online, then we call it online transaction processing systems, OTPS. So we have seen three types of information and data processing, and in the next part we will talk more about user interfaces.